has been a voice for the state regarding racial discrimination in student discipline, as well as the disproportionality and over-identification of African American students in special education. Renaldo has successfully developed numerous trainings related to special education and positive behavior supports relating to restraint and seclusion in schools. Renaldo is also a co-founder of the African American Conference on Disabilities. The AACD is the only comprehensive conference in the United States that addresses the intersection between race and disability. In January 2014, Renaldo was promoted to coordinator of the Help America Vote Act Protection and Advocacy Voting Access Program. The purpose of PAVA, is to ensure persons with disabilities have an opportunity to vote privately and independently and have full participation in the electoral process for individuals with disabilities, including registering to vote, casting a vote, and accessing polling places. So welcome, Mr. Fowler.
Thank you for the invite. Speaking with you again this year. What I want to do today is just I've decided a few years ago is just to start looking at transition a little bit different. Just for those, give you a little bit of background. Next slide, please. So that was the introduction. Next slide, please. So ACDL, the Arizona Center for Disability Law, is a not-for-profit protection and advocacy agency. Every state in the United States has a protection and advocacy agency, and we are the one that is for Arizona. We provide providing advocacy information, referral services, community legal education, in selected cases, legal representation to individuals with disabilities. Next slide, please. So let me just talk a little bit about ACDL. Our main focus to ensure the civil rights protections of persons with disability. This slide is good. I just want to add that. So that's one of our main focuses, to make sure the civil rights of individuals are protected. We have a number of programs that we have at ACDL. I would encourage you to go to our website. I have the website at the end of the link at the end of this presentation. So we do a lot of work in the area of special education and mental health. We're the client assistance program for the state of Arizona. I did a client assistance work back in 1984 when Arizona first got the client assistance grant. So I've done a little bit of work in the RSA too. But today, the purpose of this presentation is to provide some general information in a summary form, and is not intended to be a substitute for legal advice. Federal state laws can change at any time, so please stay abreast of the possible changes to the law. That's our disclaimer. Next slide, please. So the topics today, I'm gonna, like I said, I mentioned to you earlier, I'm gonna talk about transition, but I'm not gonna talk about some of the traditional things, but some of the things that I've seen over the years working in special education statewide. One of the things that the Arizona Center for Disability Law is a statewide agency. I've gone to IEP meetings in Naco, up on the Navajo Nation, such as Pinon, Page, Chloride, Kingman, Yuma, Parker, White River, Metropolitan Phoenix, Tucson. So we get a pretty good gauge of what's happening statewide in special education. And so I come from that perspective. I'm going to talk today briefly about post-secondary transition. I'm going to talk about civil engagement, access to the electoral process. I oversee our voting rights project here at ACDL, and I'll talk more about that. And I really would like for you guys to start thinking about how we can integrate some of this engagement, civil engagement, in the transition part of students' life. And I'm the co-founder of the African American Conference on Disabilities. We have a conference coming up in a few weeks. I'm going to talk more about that. So next slide, please. If you have any questions during my presentation, please feel free to use the chat or just ask me. I'm not real good at looking down at the chat. So if there's something in the chat I'm not catching, please let me know. Any questions so far about the Arizona? Everybody's familiar with the Arizona Center for Disability Law, right? Is that correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see anybody, so I'm going to say yes. So everyone's familiar with the word post-secondary transition. Post-secondary transition can be thought of as a bridge between school programs and opportunity for adult life, including higher education, training, employment, and independent living. And one of the things I really like to focus on the word is a bridge between. And that's really, really important. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned to you, we're the Arizona Center for Disability Law. So people have to understand that when we receive a phone call in special education, VR client, mental health, it's usually based on there's a problem. It could be at different levels, such as just needing general information about their rights, to as far as discrimination, retaliation against them. And so these are some of the things that we receive. And so in the area of special education around transition planning, these are some areas that I've seen. This is a common thread. These are nothing new. These are things that I would say to you, I've been here for many years. When it comes down to transition, I don't want to sound harsh, but most transition programs that I see from one end to the other end, there are some great programs out there, and I've seen some of those great programs, but overall, I think we don't do a very good job of preparing young people for post-secondary opportunities. That's one of my strongest feelings. I won't put a grade on it, but it won't be too good. And I think when I look at that, I look at barriers to transition. I think inappropriate transition planning and services. I've seen too many IEPs that will say, Johnny will get a job, Johnny will interested in this, but I don't see the activities that you're doing to prepare that student for the real world, okay? So that's some of the deficits that I see. One of my biggest pet peeves is number 2, premature graduation, emphasis on credits rather than acquisition of appropriate transition skills. This really started kicking in, I would probably say about 8 years ago. The big emphasis, it went from really transition planning to emphasis on credit hours. Once they get those 22, let's get them out the door, no matter what their skills are, no matter what, if they need some additional time in school. So that's one of the areas that I think it's important for us to continue to focus on acquiring appropriate transition skills, may it be in employment opportunities, post-secondary education, things of that nature, independent living. Also, this is another one, inadequate participation and coordination with state agencies. I think so often there's some good relationships between RSA, DDD, and school districts and the mental health system, but oftentimes it's a little too competitive. Who's responsible for what? Who's responsible for this? So I think if we can, there are some good coordinations, there are some between states, but overall, I think it's pretty lacking in terms of the various state agencies that suppose have a responsibility to work with school districts. So that needs to be improved. These are some barriers I'm identifying. And I think I'm going to talk a lot about this today. And I think, Heather, you mentioned this. This is one of the areas that I've talked about for the last few years, is inadequate self-advocacy skills and leadership development of young people with disabilities. That is one of the areas that, we emphasize academics, but when you don't have any leadership skills, when you go to a job, leadership skills when independent living, leadership skills when you go to college, and we're going to talk more about it, but this is one of the areas that acquisition of self-advocacy skills, and there are some good organizations that work out there. There's the independent living centers that can be great, helpful. There's the Diversibility and organization. They do some great work with young people with disabilities and mentoring programs. Next slide. So when I talk about self-advocacy skills and leadership development, one of the things that happens to these students is that through the IEP process and the 504 process, even though students are required to be invited to their transition plan at age 16 or young if the IEP team determines, what does that really mean? Participate and invite. Is this where they are invited to the meeting, they sit there? Or do the transition teacher works with the person and the parents work with them prior to the transition meeting and really get their ideas, and so they can incorporate those ideas into the meeting. What happens so often in the IEP process, it's a consensus decision-making platform, right? So that means that the parents are going to be the driving factor within some input from the student. And so at that point, when do the students have an opportunity to truly take the lead, and really having those skills to, and I know, Kathy, they used to have a student-led IEP. I'm not sure. I knew that was a kind of a big movement. I'm sure where does that exist? Is that still in the forefront of the school, or is that just a term that's faded a little bit? Can someone help me out who work within the school system? Are they still focusing on student-led IEPs? And what does that look like?
I'm Denise. I work with Tucson Unified School District. For our program, that's a huge focus.
Okay.
And it's something that I am trying to promote across the district. I'm
Mhm.
seeing it more and more,
Okay.
but we're getting a little bit, we're still having a lot of barriers to
Mhm.
including that. What has been the most helpful is when students are able to present and show everybody their student-led IEP and kind of show how beneficial it is. We're seeing more teachers see
Mhm.
that and the positivity of it, and then try to incorporate it more.
Right. And that's very important. And I think, Denise, is that correct, Denise? I think,
Yes.
Denise, one of the things that should be part of their curriculum. I know we talk about ABCs, math and science, but this leadership skills should be part of the curriculum. There should be a part where students are taught. I mean, they may or may not know, as you know, Denise, they have to learn how to become the leader in the process. What does it mean to feel comfortable expressing your opinions? So, I applaud you to continue to work with that, but that is an area that I think that is so crucial because it will impact, and we're going to talk more about it. So number two is supported decision-making, self-determination, building support systems. So we go from this IEP 504 process where it's a consensus building. They show up on the front steps of RSA, and RSA want to talk to them, not mom, not uncle, okay? They'll talk to the guardian, but they want to talk to the student. What are your interests, okay? So now they're being talked to directly from state agencies. Maybe or maybe not, they've been taught to have those skills. And so it's really frustrating for students, and sometimes it's frustrating for parents because parents during this IEP process, they're the decision maker, they're part of everything. Then all of a sudden they go into the new world when they turn 18. They don't necessarily want to talk to mom or dad, not being disrespectful, but they want to talk to the client, the adult, the person who makes the decisions at that particular time. So those are some really tough decisions for families to understand. And also one of the most important things we here at ACDL, we want to ensure that an individual with a disability maintains the maximum amount of rights that they have to exercise control of their life. So oftentimes I've heard, schools talk about, you need to go and get guardianship of your child. Automatically, or schools may say that, or parents may say that. But one of the things that there are a lot of alternatives to guardianship. And one of the things you need to keep in mind is when you have guardianship, that takes away all that person's rights to vote, rights to reproduction, marriage. So that's really intrusive. So what we do is, this is a link below that talks about self-advocacy and what options are out there other than guardianship. Now, some students may need guardianship, but I think it's important that we understand there's other things other than guardianship. I see there's things in the chat. Are there any questions in the chat? Let me go to chat. I'm trying to do a little bit better.
I can read them for you too, Renaldo.
If you could, that would be real helpful.
Okay, not a problem. The first one is, do you know if there are any plans to get supported decision-making passed in the legislature again?
I actually, I was on a call and I know that there are some strategies through the ARC, and I would recommend you reaching out to John Myers over the ARC of Arizona or the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. I know they have strategies to try to, I think it died last year with 1 vote. I think that's, if I'm not misspeaking, but I know they're looking at some strategies about introducing it, or may not, I'm not sure. Okay.
And then the second one is more so of a statement versus a question. It just says, I'm a middle school teacher who would like to develop more transition services for my kids entering high school. I do not have many who hit the age for transition plan, but have students who need to start thinking about it much earlier.
Okay.
Very true.
Remember that age, it's up to the IEP team if they want to start earlier than that age. It's just a matter of, you're working with your administration and saying that even though I think it's important for us to start transition, there's nothing that prevents you from focusing on transition earlier than age 16. There's nothing that prevents you. And it actually says if the IEP team says appropriate, you can start earlier. Did I answer your question?
I don't think there was a question related. I think it was more of a
Comment?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
and my apologies, that was mine. It was, I
Okay.
think I would love to work with the agencies more, but I don't know who's available out there that would work with, 13, 14-year-olds.
Well,
So,
remember this, there is no age limit on when state agencies' obligations. I mean, that's what IDEA talks about. And I know, that I'm not aware. It just says, if the IEP teams determine appropriate, you can start looking at transition planning. Now, what does that mean? Give you a good example. Like travel training, kids that may not drive a car, you can start talking about the bus system, the transit system, if you live in Tucson, an assignment on how to catch a bus safety, the whole concept of bus, public transportation. So you can start talking about jobs. What are you interested in? So there's a lot of things you can do in terms of transition planning that may involve companies or not, agencies or not agencies. So, and there are people at the Department of Education that have some good resources for you on their website. And Kathy may know some additional information about transition planning too.
thank you.
Next slide, please. So one of the things as we talk about self-development, what I think is real important is getting young people with disabilities to realize as becoming an adult, civil engagement, access to voting is very important. And so that's one of my jobs. I'll talk more about it in the next slide, but I oversee our protection and voter access program called PAVA. PAVA was created based on the Federal Health America Vote Act of 2002. And so what PAVA does works to ensure that persons with disability have an opportunity to cast a private and independent vote and enjoy full participation in the electoral process, registering to vote, casting a vote, and accessing polling places. One of the things I want to be real clear when I talk about access to the electoral process, I'm not talking about just voting. I'm talking about registering to vote. I'm talking about getting materials done in a way that voters with disabilities can understand some of the propositions. I'm talking about working with the election officials to make sure their websites are accessible for people with disabilities and the content is accessible for people with disabilities. And I use a broad term of persons with disabilities. And so what I do in terms of the Protection Voter Access Program, I work with the Arizona Disability Voter Coalition, which is a loose group of organizations, stakeholders who work together with us to, if you can have the next slide, please. So what we try to do is to work together, the PAVA and the Arizona Disability Voter Coalition, Anybody that wants to be part of that, just email me and just say, hey, I'm interested in voting. I'd like to participate. We're going to be scheduling an upcoming meeting, and we're going to talk about what are some of the activities we're going to do. We're going to do things around voter registration, around voters with disabilities, voter education. It's a nonpartisan job I have. So if you want to, whatever your party is, that's fine with me, as long as it's about improving voting for persons with disabilities. Now, what are some of the barriers that prevent voters with disabilities from voting, engage in voting? Number one, cultural expectations. It's amazing that there are people, family members, people out there who feel very strongly that persons with disabilities shouldn't be voting. If they have an intellectual disability, they shouldn't be voting, okay? You get family members who may believe that, but you know, we want to have expectations for all students, disability or not, without disabilities, is that, you know, voting is part of your rights as a citizen of this country, okay? Number two, voter education, understanding your voting rights, not just the person, but the family members, things of that nature. Maintaining voting rights, automatically you're going down, taking away a person's right to vote rather than saying, hey, my daughter or son is interested in voting. When you go up to guardianship, you know, try to get guardianship, then you need to let the judge know that my child is interested in maintaining voting rights. And there's a process in Arizona where the judge can provide guardianship, but done in a limited manner to reserve that person's right to vote, okay? So that's one of the things that we try to explain to people all the time. If you're considering becoming the person's guardian and you're interested in protecting their rights, make sure you do it when you file that petition and let them know this person's interested in maintaining their voting rights. And so the judge can do that. One of the most basic things that you surprise is the lack of valid identification. There are so many people today that do not have valid ID to register to vote. Now, in Arizona, most people register to vote, especially now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of voter registration activities are not occurring in person. So most people now are relegated to use Service Arizona, where you get your driving license, you can also register to vote. Now, to use Service Arizona, you must have a state-issued driving license or a state-issued ID, non-driver license ID. That's how you register to vote. There are so many young people running around without any ID, so they can't even register to vote. That's a barrier, okay? So if you're working on transition, making sure that they understand if they don't drive a car, they can apply for a state-issued ID, and that will give them access to Service Arizona so they can register to vote in the safety of their home, okay? Inadequate accommodations. We work with election officials to make sure they understand what their obligations is to provide accommodations for persons with disabilities. That includes registering to vote. That includes accessing polling locations, okay, and casting a vote. Now, there are so many other factors that are out there that prevent persons from registering to vote. And also kind of keep in mind, if you live in a group home or in a setting where there's staff and you register to vote and you get vote by mail, you need to make sure staff is giving you all your information so you can vote, or staff is not trying to influence you. Or if you move to a new group home or different living setting, there's someone there that can assist you to update your voter registration. We are working with different agencies out there, such as APAB, which is a provider association, to talk with them about making sure group home provider agencies, when a person moves in, they ask them about registering to vote or updating their voter registration. As you can see, this is a big systems issue around voter education and access to the electoral process for persons with disabilities. Any questions about this so far?
Looks like we're all good in the chat too.
All in the chat? Anything in chat? Okay.
Nope.
Next slide, please. So as I mentioned to you that the Protection of Voter Access and the Arizona Disability Voter Coalition, these are the areas that we work. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas. We work with increased voter registration for Arizonans with disabilities, increased voter participation for Arizonans with disabilities, that's casting a vote, increased voter education opportunities for Arizonans with disabilities. We work with election officials to address the electoral needs of Arizonans with disabilities and protect the rights of Arizonans with disabilities to ensure full access to the electoral process. So let's talk about number one. It's amazing the number of barriers that prevent people from registering to vote. We mentioned some of those. So as you think about transition planning, think about how you can do some basic voter education. If you have young people with disabilities that are age 18 that don't have a guardian, they can register to vote. You can assist them to register to vote. They can do Service Arizona, or they can do the paper, hard paper. And we found, number two, increased participation, casting a vote. We found, especially during the COVID-19, many challenges around casting a vote. There are people that live in group homes who may need assistance on casting their vote. There's a confusion about who can take their ballot, not take their ballot to the polls, because Arizona prevents voter harvesting. But when you kind of read it, it talks about people that are being cared for, family members, I don't have it all in front of me, that can assist with taking their ballot. If you guys have any questions about a lot of these things with around voting, please contact your recorder, Pima County recorder, or your Pima County election director. You have a new Pima County election director. She has been to a few of our Arizona Disability Voter Coalition, and she's fully participated in those meetings. And so she's talked with the disability community and in trying to improve voting for a person with disabilities in Pima County. So I do applaud her of her efforts. And also voter education opportunities. One of the things that I do here at ACDL and our self-advocacy partners, we do voter education training, virtual voter education training. So if you guys are interested in getting voter education trainings for students or persons with disabilities, give me a call. We'll set that up. There's no charge for that. It could be Zoom or Teams or whichever platform you use. Normally I do it with my self-advocacy friends, and we can gear it down to whatever level we need to gear it to. We can just have it at a higher level, or we can gear it down to students with intellectual disabilities. So we've done different ranges to talk about voter education. So if you're interested, please let us know. Working with election officials. This is one of the things that I do. The goal is to work with our election officials to ensure that we have things worked out prior to the election. We put a lot of energy on reaching out to election officials about accessible voting machines, disability etiquette. All of these things we work with our election officials. We have our Disability Voter Coalition meetings. We invite our election officials and they come and they participate. They have an opportunity to listen to persons with disabilities, to talk about some of the issues that they face. I'm going to give you a good example why it's important. One of the elections a few years ago in one of the cities, suburbs in Phoenix, there was a long line at the polling locations, and one of the poll workers started going down the line yelling, handicaps, handicaps, handicaps to the front. Do we think that's appropriate?
No.
No. We understood the intent, but that's what was not appropriate, right? So we talked with the county about poll worker training. Number one, you need to have signage at the polls to let people know if you need accessibility, here's what you do. If you need curbside voting, if it's offered in your county, here's what you do. Signage, and not just signage, how large the sign is, the positioning of the signs, the color of the signs, those types of things. And so that's why we work with our election officials to talk about disability etiquette, talk about when they do, making sure the polling locations are accessible for people with disabilities, on and on and on. And final, protecting the rights of Arizonans with disabilities. We run a hotline on election day. If you have problems with access to voting, you give us a call. We'll try to work it out and get it fixed so you can vote that day. You may show up at a polling location and the accessible machine may be off. You give us a call. We'll try to get that fixed. So there are a number of issues. You try to do voting, curbside voting, and the bell isn't working. Nobody's coming out. You give us a call. We try to get that fixed. And we also can assist you filing a HAVA complaint if you feel that your rights have been discriminated. But the most important thing, we try to fix it that day of the elections because we don't want to get you disenfranchised if it's not fixed that day, lose your right to vote. Okay, next slide, please. All right, any questions about voting? Any questions about voting? Okay, so I want to bring this up. So we have the African American Conference on Disability. This conference was founded, this is our 11th year, and was founded by David Carey and myself. And it started over a 15-minute conversation. And I'm just going to be real honest with you. As you know, I've been in the disability field since 1984. And over the years, I've been to many presentations, conferences, workshops. And one of the things I clearly have seen is very few African-American families at many of these events. And so David, we got together and we said, look, let's just do an event to do reach out to the community, let them know about disabilities, let African-American moms know about early interventions, because there was a lot of complaints that early interventions weren't going into African-American communities and also in the Hispanic communities, Native communities, and not really going out to the families. Families are very untrusting of people that don't look like them because of historical factors, okay? That's just reality, okay? So we put the first one together in 3 weeks and we didn't have a budget. We had a few box lunches. That was almost 11 years ago. Last year, because of COVID-19, we decided to hold the first conference last year in person. We had 11,000 people attend across the United States, including, I think, 10 different countries attend the conference. It was free and it was just overwhelming. We had no anticipation that that number of individuals would attend the conference. I would encourage you, if you have access to your computer, go to the website. The link is on the screen. We have 12 different workshops. Our opening speaker this year, the conference is of course free. We have 12 sessions. It starts February the 1st through February the 17th. We do 2 workshops a day on Tuesdays and Thursdays from the 1st through the 17th. It will be recorded on Facebook for those who schedules may conflict, so they will be available following the conference on Facebook to view the conference. We're offering continuing legal education for the attorneys, and certificates of attendance will be available for those who need certificates of attendance. This is a good opportunity for families who have kids in the foster care system or foster parents to get some training hours for free. The conference doesn't cost you anything. Our opening session is going to be done by Dr. McCaskill. She's with Gallaudet University, which is a university that train higher education for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So Dr. McAllister, she's going to be opening up the conference. The next session we're going to have is going to be Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, who is also a parent, and she is with, she's out of California, and she's going to talk about parenting a child on the autism spectrum. Not often do you get an African-American mom perspective, and she's also a specialist in early intervention, okay, in underserved communities. She's going to be presenting with Danita Shaw. So, and for those, our third section, I'm just kind of walking through this with you. Our third section is going to be an important workshop around school to prison disproportionality and school discipline. And my coworker, Amanda Glass, is going to be spearheading that with the panel. We have actually a Tucson person from the juvenile justice, I think, court system. She's going to be presenting and also a professor from Arizona State University. She's also a mom, and she's a professor, and her specialty is policy. And we're going to have an attorney from the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, and he's talking about the role that the Office of Civil Rights play in terms of discipline, discrimination. So that's going to be a great presentation. So if you work with children who face discipline, okay, this is a presentation that you need to be at, because we have some great experts that's going to talk about discipline. And we're talking about representing children. Amanda is going to cover the process, and we have the feds there to talk about their role in terms of disproportionality and discrimination for students with disabilities. I would encourage you to participate. Dr. Dawson and Dr. Holt. Dr. Holt is out of Tucson, and they're going to talk about trauma in the African-American community. And we have, and this is a nice one for those, we have a lot, I think I saw a lot of DR staff there. Dr. Wendy Parrott, and we have another person that's going to talk about how assistive technology can impact employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities. That's going to be a really, really nice presentation around employment opportunities. You guys talk about transition planning. That's going to be really good for students to participate and for those who work in this area of transition planning. On February the 8th, we have a really serious workshop. As you guys know, Tucson unfortunately made national news last year with the police shooting of a gentleman in a wheelchair. We all understand what I'm talking about. Is that correct? We all know that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. My coworker, Asim Dietrich, is going to be doing a presentation around legal rights and best practice for individual experience of mental health crisis. Now, maybe that gentleman didn't have a mental health crisis, but it's going to be talking about how law enforcement interact with people with disabilities in terms of first responders. So I would encourage you, if anyone you are working in the mental health field or that field, disability field, to really take a look at that presentation. We also have a presentation on vaccination misinformation. I think that's really, really important. I know we talk about in terms of African-American community, but we know the pandemic has been devastating on persons with disabilities. And we have Dr. Henry and Dr. Gilliam are going to come in and talk about how misinformation impacts the community, including the community, disability community. And this is an important one too. Transition rooted in self-determination. This presentation is going to be a panel discussion of young people with disabilities. And we're going to talk about the decision-making, what they did, what they should have done in terms of transition. So I would encourage you, if you have any students, think about participating in this panel discussion. They're an hour and a half long. So one of the things we pride ourselves on is having good conversation from the audience. And so if you didn't go, I think there was a comment. Are there any comments in the chat that I need to be aware of? I think I was kind of talking, I did see some chats come through.
I don't think there's anything you need to be aware of. Just people
Okay.
are stating that they've attended before and it was a really great conference.
So how many people have been to the conference there's 13 people. How many people have been to the conference, previous conference of the 13? I'm just kind of curious. Yes?
I think three so
Three is
far.
what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Well,
I
if you
attended one
haven't, please
session.
go and share. It's free. I mean, one of the things that we have our partners at the UCED in Tucson and IHD that allow us to have this conference without a charge. And even when we are in person, we have scholarships for family. We hope to go back live in 2023. That's our goal, you know, but it changes all the time. All right, but guys, I want to really say this. If you look at session 9, we have actual around voting, Commissioner Thomas Hicks, who is an appointment, a presidential appointment. He's with the Election Assistance Commission. He's going to lead a panel of experts to talk about what resources the federal government has regarding voters with disabilities. We have the executive director of the Access Board, U.S. Access Board. We have a member of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and we have an expert, ADA expert on accessibility around voting. If you guys have any questions around voting, accessibility issues, what resources are available, I would encourage you to come to that session. And these are the gentlemen that are going to be able to answer your questions. And we also have one of our last two presentations, we have a workshop on self-advocacy movement, civil rights movement. As you see, we have two workshops that really focuses on self-advocacy. That's a big push that I think is important. So these are going to be the older guys talking about the civil rights movement, and we got advocates from Chicago, Alabama, and Arizona to talk about what they're doing in terms of self-advocacy in their community and how to build and continue the self-advocacy movement. And our final, we have a housing discrimination done by our staff, and we have a presentation by Derek with the University of Iowa USET program. I just kind of went over those with you. You can go to the link, take a look, register, share it with individuals that you know that might be interested in the conference. We do this every year. The conference is open to anyone. If you went to the conference in person, you see how we do things at the conference. It's designed focused for the audience. It's all focused around the audience. We set the climate that's friendly, you communicate. I didn't want to cancel it. David, we didn't want to cancel it. So we decided to go to the virtual format. Last year, it was just fantastic. We had so many people across the country trying to figure out how do we do this in Arizona with our small numbers of African Americans. We have good resource, good partnership in Arizona. And I will be speaking about this at our National Disability Conference on how they can replicate this in different locations to meet any underserved community. We're just focusing on African Americans, but at the end of the day, the content is good content for whoever, and if you want to learn. I think it's as I went over the information, it's very helpful information for the community in general. Any questions or anything that you have? I'm trying to look at the, I had to look at my training last year. Okay. Any more questions about kind of what we talked about today, or is there something I didn't cover you want to talk about? I just think one of the things I really want to point out, as I think Heather mentioned earlier, you're going to invite someone in. I think it's so crucial that we start thinking about developing those self-advocacy skills. I know there's a big emphasis on ABCs, and that's important. But I tell you, we got to work on those self-advocacy skills, self-determination skills. And there are some organizations in Tucson and in Phoenix that are good resources. I mean, Diversability, if you guys haven't worked with Millie's program, Diversability, they're just a great program. I do some voter education training with them. I know Direct has some good sources down in Tucson, so reach out to Vicki at Direct. There's some great ideas. And of course, we have Kathy with Raising Special Kids that has good resources for you. Next slide, please. So this is the information how to reach to ACDL if you need assistance. We have our website. We do our intakes Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Friday from 9 to 1. However, you can go to our website and complete an intake anytime at night or during the day, or so that's our information. That is the end of my presentation. I hope it was helpful. I just want to talk about a few things around transition. If you have any questions about voting or the conference, feel free to reach out to me at ACD. I'll be happy to talk with you about the conference. That's the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you so
All
much.
right, I can see everybody's face now. Any questions?
I don't see any so far.
What's this?
We have a statement that says I was not aware of the voting issues and that the officials were to be aware.
Oh yeah. We work, it's so important, guys. I'm gonna give you a good example. I don't know if you know, but election officials on election day often are hiring people to work on election day, right? A lot of students could, it's usually around boxes, moving boxes, things of that nature, but they do hire individuals for a job. And I think that's an opportunity for young people to get hired on election day. We work with Recorder Fontes, our previous recorder in Maricopa County, not the current one, but the previous one. He had an area in Maricopa County, they call it deputy register. So the county puts on a deputy register training. And so you learn how to register people to vote. Well, Recorder Fontes went out with one of the provider agencies and did a training at a provider agency, and they called them young ambassadors. And so these were young people with disabilities that went out and talked to other young people with disabilities about the voter registration process and how to register the vote. The responses from peer to peer are quite different than when I go in a room and talk about voting, okay? So there's a lot of things we can think about to get young people involved and engaged in voter opportunities. And those are the things you might want to reach out to Recorder Gabrielle to see, is there anything around upcoming elections that could be helpful? I know she's looking to do some things with her website and really improve access to voting for people with disabilities. We've had that conversation with her. She's new in the, she's fairly new. She's not even been there a year, but she's met with us and has talked with the disability community and trying to improving things in Pima County. And if there's anything that you can share with her office to help her do her job, that's the great thing. Because we do enforcement in terms of part of my job. But as you saw, working with election officials is very important to me in a collaborative manner, because they may not know. They may not know the resources that are available out there, okay? So it's always good to let them know, hey, here's what we do, here's what I think will be helpful for you, and here's the resources that we can help you with. Any more comments that I can answer?
We do have somebody raising their hand.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Tariq Williams. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I just want to say thank you for everything. As an individual, I work at Civic Services for the Blind, and I'm the student services manager, as well as chapter president of the National Federation of the Blind. And it was also really neat to hear some of the things that you were saying as a blind person myself, as well as an African American. And so my immediate question, which I hope I get the opportunity to get your information and send you an email, but my immediate question is specifically to voting. Are most of the voting initiatives happening for specifically the actual day of voting, or is there some things that are going on for absentee ballots? For example, one of the things that we've been working on advocating for is being involved in UCAVA and trying to get that change for that absentee voting, so there's more accessibility in that situation. Is there anything being talked about that?
So thank you, Tariq, right? Tariq?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you. I wanted to say this. I want to say this real quick. Tariq, Savvy, you know Jordan Moon. You know Jordan, right?
Yes,
you
sir.
Know Jordan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jordan is actually part of our Arizona Disability Voter Coalition. So Savvy is a partner with us. And also, I just want to say this to you. You said that you're on the board of the National Federation of the Blind. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Our actual speaker at the voter, session on voting is actually used to be a board member. I can't think of his name. I have to look at it. He's actually used to be on the board of the National Federation of the Blind. He is now executive director of the Access Board. So I want to share those common links with you to let you know that the National Federation is represented on our Disability Voter Coalition, and we are working with them. And Lou Ann Blake from the National Federation also did a presentation, voting rights presentation. To answer your question is, one of the things, Tariq, do you want me to explain kind of what do you guys know what UNCAVA is? Do you know what that is? You ever heard that term before? Tariq, do you want to explain that or you want me? Feel free to explain it.
Yeah, I don't want to take up any extra time, so you can go
Okay, but
ahead.
no, we're actually got 1 minute. This is very important. Real quick is one of the things that's really important to voters. Remember I said to you, we want to make sure that voting is accessible for all people with disabilities. One of the things that the blind and low vision community would like is have electronic way so they can cast a vote in a private way so they can use their technology. It's not available now, but it's available through, they call it Mkava. That's if you're overseas, military, ambassadorship, you can do your electronic voting. It's available in Arizona that way, but they're trying to get the blind and low vision community, trying to get that accessible for that population. So that's kind of what Tariq was talking about on this process. And so to answer your question, there's discussion around it, and it's just a matter of maybe require legislative changes to it. And there's a big push at the state level too. Thank you for your time. It is 4:30. Tariq, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at ACDL. And I hope you're able to join us at the conference. I think it's going to be a really good conference. Any questions before I go? It's 4:30. We're all good?
Thank
think
you
we're
so
all
much.
good.
It was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Yes.
And then Tariq, if you
Thank
want to
you.
if you can put your email in the chat, we can make sure to forward Mr. Fowler's information to you.
Absolutely, I'll do that right now.
Thank you.
All
This
right.
was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. And if you need anything, you know where to find me. Looking forward to speaking to you maybe again next year. Take care. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.